I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to share my screen. And I hope that you can see what I want you to see. The first slide of the presentation. Thank you for inviting me today. As Duhovka said, we've had many discussions about this particular topic, and I think I am somewhat unreasonably nervous today because the topic is so vast. The idea of citizenship, it's actually really hard to pin down and hard to find an exact definition for. So I think that it's great that the EU has provided us with one, because by country, we struggle with the exact definition of citizenship education. So thanks very much for having me. You see here some familiar maps. And it's true that when you become a teacher, you can't help but revisit the memories of your own education. In Montessori teacher training, our focus and our spotlight on the spiritual preparation of the adult and the guide can really provoke a lot of deep memories and reflection on your own childhood experiences. I personally think a lot about home or first languages and identity when I'm working with children in multilingual settings. I was actually an adult before I really realized that my home language is the Creole or Patois of Guyana, and not the Canadian English that you hear me speaking now. But that's a long story for another day. These maps are here because they represent my journey. So I was born in Guyana in South America. I immigrated as a toddler to Toronto and grew up in Canada, and I've been living in Czech Republic since 2003. I'm a citizen in only one of those places, and I'm a permanent resident of another. I also think a lot about the potential of Montessori education to, and maybe our responsibility as well as Montessori educators, to impart key ideas and experiences around citizenship. For example, what does it mean to be a citizen, a member, or a part of a community? Who gets to participate? How can we express and share our ideas and listen to one another, even when we disagree? And how do we work together? How can a community look after its environment? How can variety and difference and diversity offer new perspectives that strengthen a community? And how do traditions, customs, and innovations connect us to our past, but also influence our future? So we're definitely not going to answer all of those questions in our time together. My intention is really to provoke discussion, to leave you with ideas to reflect on, and hopefully to give you a little inspiration. So here you can see the competencies that are outlined by the EU for lifelong learning. I think you've probably, if you've been attending the series, there's been more discussion of 3 other competences. And today we're going to look at citizenship. So what is citizenship? Is it just a passport? Is it voting? Is it environmental stewardship? Is it lovely phrases that we see on the internet? Is it being part of a community or many communities? Is it human rights or a focus on rights? Or is it all of those things and our own self-development? If you have any ideas about citizenship and you think I've missed anything, please feel free to add some of those ideas in the chat. I'd be very interested in seeing what else you have to add. So the definition of this citizenship competence is the ability to act as a responsible citizen and to participate fully in civic and social life based on an understanding of social, economic, legal, and political concepts and structures, as well as global developments and sustainability. So I think that you can see perhaps why I was a little nervous about the breadth of this particular topic and all the things there are to cover. And like I said, we won't be covering everything, but we will make a start. So there are 3 components to each of the competences: knowledge, skill, and attitudes. In the knowledge component, we've got basic concepts and the phenomena related to individuals, understanding of the European common values and the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, knowledge of contemporary events, and critical understanding of the main developments in national, European, and world history. There are a few more of these. I'll click through them, but I won't read them all. So the knowledge component is huge, actually. It spans quite a diverse or a broad range of knowledge categories. And so I think that's one benefit that already we've got in Montessori, especially in elementary education. Since we have an integrated curriculum, there's many ways for us to approach citizenship indirectly. The skills that belong to citizenship are listed here. So we can see engaging effectively with others in common or public interest, critical thinking, integrated problem-solving skills. We need to have access and to information, but also to different kinds of media so that we can have information to make good decisions or to consider, and to understand the role and functions of media in democratic societies. And then attitudes that are part of the citizenship competence are respect for human rights as a basis for democracy. We know we have a strong tradition of that in Montessori, so strong, in fact, that I think she's one of the few people that ever advocated for a party of the child, for example. And in many of Montessori's writings, she focuses even on demanding human rights, or citizenship rather, for the newborn, which I think is pretty unique in education. Willingness to participate in democratic decision-making at all levels and civic activities, support for social and cultural diversity, gender equality, and social cohesion. And lastly, an interest in political and socio and economic developments. So those three components really do cover a lot of information. So Montessori says we must revise our concepts, our attitudes, and our educational systems if we wish to help man become more cultured, more disciplined, more open to abstract ideas, if our aim is indeed to help him grow to become a citizen of the world. So I think this quote really very well echoes the European Commission's motivation for attempting to direct educational outcomes around citizenship. And it is one aspect of why I think Montessori education in particular is well positioned to fulfill those competences. The first is that if we look at the way we work with children in particular, we are the underlying ethos of Montessori education is the idea that we can make the world a better place and a more peaceful place through the methodology and our ways of being with children. And I think what's key here, and what I struggled with a little bit in terms of sharing examples with you, is that I think what Montessori was saying to us is that that is in fact the most important aspect of this education and of all our materials and our methodology, that unlocking children's potential is key to this idea, that in several of her works and throughout different subject areas, Montessori actually implores us to imagine what would the world be like if we trusted that children were more creative, intelligent, capable, and insightful than we give them credit for being. What might they discover if their imaginations were stoked and fed by facts and correct information? And what could they achieve in the name of human solidarity if they understood themselves as a part of a human continuum? And she uses this idea of human solidarity throughout time in several of her works, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later on. So just as to frame our discussion today, some questions to kind of keep in the back of your mind while we're going through the presentation is, what do you think the ultimate purpose of Montessori education is? I've given you one view, but you might feel differently. do you truly consider the child to be a citizen from birth? And how are independence and citizenship connected? And what about my school, my culture, or even myself might be obstacles to helping a child grow to become a citizen of the world? So one of the rationales for this project is obviously to demonstrate how well suited Montessori education is to meeting the requirements of these EU competencies. It may be a little bit outside of the scope of the agenda, but I wanted to take this opportunity to challenge us all a little bit. I believe that Montessori education can meet these criteria and can fulfill the citizenship competence, but yet I myself have been guilty of talking about how Montessori can do this and it can do that, and it's capable of so many things as though it's the answer to everything. I think it holds many of the keys, but we have to use those keys to unlock its potential. Sometimes I think about it for myself like a kitchen. So I hope you'll bear with me my analogy here. I have all the ingredients in my kitchen, but that does not make a meal. I have to use what I've purchased or what I have in my cupboards to make something nourishing. If you will bear with me a little bit longer to look at some 3 to 6 materials, the sensorial materials are a great example of this. They offer the children the opportunity to sharpen their awareness of the qualities and characteristics of the physical world. But the materials themselves are not enough. We must give relevant language to their experience with the material. That way, children can accurately communicate what they observe and experience. They have attached language, they can attach language to what Montessori referred to as materialized abstractions. So just as importantly, we have also sparked some wonder. A child might think, I wonder what that leaf feels like. It looks rough, but oh, it's actually very smooth and velvety. And I wonder if that box is heavy, it's so big. And then lifting it and finding out that in fact it's light and empty. We've helped them through attaching vocabulary to an experience to make sense of their world and to be able to communicate those ideas. These are key experiences that contribute to self-expression, but also to understanding the ideas that others are communicating to us. So there is definitely an effort by the EU, not just in this project, but in others, to address what is called democratic backsliding. So we know that a number of institutions and even governments have experienced a reversal of their commitment to democratic institutions and democratic policies. And this includes member states as much as it does newer states. And some of those member states, in fact, have quite a long uninterrupted history of democratic government and institutions. I've already mentioned that Montessori was explicit about her desire to unlock human potential, but not for the sake of academic or intellectual excellence, but to help us to work towards a more peaceful and just world. The idea that if our needs are met at the right time with rich stimulation in engaging environments where nurturing, well-informed adults guide our experiences could contribute to a better world really sold me on Montessori education. I want that world to exist. I was drawn to a method that is centered on the ideas I've just mentioned. Education is a powerful tool, and we know that it can be used to also manipulate or indoctrinate. Montessori reminds us of this, and she says, the child who has never learned to act alone, to direct his own actions, to govern his own will, grows into an adult who is easily led and must always lean upon others. So history is full of documents and documents, regimes and individuals that have used this tool, the tool of education, to devastating means, to extend their own power as a means of authoritarian ends and to control others. Montessori's belief that the child is born a citizen still remains somewhat controversial. In most countries, a person is granted the privileges of citizenship around 18 years of age. and often with not much preparation for the responsibilities of citizenship. We will explore how Montessori education can support civic engagement and promote values that support democratic culture in ways that allow the individual and society to thrive. So here we have one of the first skills, the ability to engage effectively with others in common or public interest, including the sustainable development of society. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the foundations. Before we get to elementary, perhaps a child will have had the opportunity to be part of a NIDO or a toddler program, a toddler community. And I think that that's actually where our work in fostering citizenship competences begins. So it's not an obvious outcome of the infant community or toddler programs, or even the Children's House for that matter, but the foundation is in fact already being laid. It is the child's first experience of life independent of their parents. They will build skills to care for themselves and for their environment. They will become a community of individuals working to adapt to routines, structure, ground rules, and sometimes consequences, learning how to live together and be together harmoniously and to become a person of their culture. So for this to happen, the adult or the guide must understand the developmental needs and characteristics of the children that they are working with. As you know, the 0 to 3 child is distinctive enough to have its own subplane. So Montessori named them the unconscious creators. They're learning to speak, they're learning to move, and they're learning from the world around them, from their primary caregivers and from their guides in the Montessori environment. Their development is remarkable and is heavily influenced by the input they receive from the environment. We cannot underestimate our responsibility toward the children of this age. We prepare ourselves in the environment to support positive, healthy outcomes for each child in our care. And we model respectful, correct, and expressive language in our communication with them and with the other adults in the environment. We could stop here and talk at length about the importance of using correct language, not only as a tool of communication, but as a building block of independence. And as a prerequisite for agency, the importance of being able to say what you mean is a fundamental aspect of participation. And participation is a key function of citizenship. To be able to participate means that you have the potential to be a citizen. And it's also a key element of democratic culture. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on. So the adult prepares an environment that supports the broadening of vocabulary, the coordination of movement, and the development of functional and independence or self-care. Creativity and expression are also encouraged, and consideration is given to developing the whole child. Some key outcomes of this age range are the child learns by doing, learns through experience, and is an agent of their own learning. So choice is an incredibly important aspect of work from the very beginning, and from the children's experience in the environment from the very beginning. And when you think about the difference between our programs and perhaps other early education programs, this aspect of choice really does differentiate the way we work with the children and the way they work in the environment, and is a building block or a fundamental to independence. And independence, obviously, I'm sure you can see the connection to citizenship. So agency, the child feels, I know how to be here. I know how to be with others. I'm confident. Choice, I can decide what work I would like to do. Self-care, I can do things for myself and feel good about doing those things. And in these early years, a healthy relationship with effort emerges. And we'll talk a little bit later about how that is incorporated or how relevant that is to citizenship. So learning to make decisions and experience positive and challenging consequences of my actions is also another outcome. And the child in this environment is a citizen and is already experiencing the joys and responsibilities of citizenship. So in the second subplane, Montessori referred to the child between 3 to 6 years as the conscious worker. We know that they want to participate, a key feature of citizenship. We've already talked about that. We don't always know how important, sorry, let me start that again. They don't always know how to participate. So an important part of our work in the Children's House is to help them develop concentration, and through concentration, help them to identify the areas of the environment that they feel most called to. And it's a symbiotic relationship. So the attraction to the materials gives them the opportunity to focus on something, and that focus becomes concentration. These skills, and a wide variety of skills that are developed in the first in the Children's House, require coordinated movement and an understanding of sequence. So these are the exercises of practical life, and they have an absolute citizenship function, independence. Another feature of practical life are the grace and courtesy experiences, where we demonstrate many examples of how to live well with one another. So what I was trying to say before, and I got a little mixed up and jumbled in my words, is that the children, when they're coming into the environment, they don't necessarily know how to be together. They don't know how to look after the environment together. They may not know how to look after themselves, and they might not know how to resolve, they definitely don't know how to resolve difficult situations. So through practical life, we're helping them to acquire all of those skills, and they're able to build up that independence for themselves. And grace and courtesy is so key to that, to facilitating what I like to think of as a social contract. So sometimes people will say to me, how do 25 or 26 young children all do something on their own independently in the environment? How does that happen? How are you not doing, frontal instruction, and how does that all facilitate it? And I think it's the social contract that both aspects of practical life facilitate: the actual exercises of practical life, but also the grace and courtesy. So in this age range, we have a micro society, we have freedom and its flip side, responsibility. We have independence and obedience. The children begin looking after the environment and recognizing their responsibility in looking after the environment. The child could say, I can look after myself and I'm able to contribute and do my part. I can consider others. I can begin to negotiate conflict. I can say, no, I don't like that, or yes, I will have more, thank you. And one thing that I love about the way we work with resolving conflict, or even sometimes aggression, is not just expecting a young person to say sorry and then run off to the other side of the playground, but instead saying, can I get you an ice pack? Would you like a glass of water? Would you like to sit down? So there's an aspect already of trying to make amends or address the needs of another. Practical life is the bedrock of the Children's House, and it incorporates knowledge, skill, and attitudes that contribute to the healthy functioning of the community. So this quote here is about social cohesion. Montessori recognized that there was something that unfolded in the environment, not just spontaneous writing or spontaneous reading, but also a kind of spontaneous care for one another, that when the children were in the environment and they had been given these tools through practical life and grace and courtesy, what she observed was society by cohesion, not commanded by behavior, not imitative because it is lacking in the world as it is. It is natural, a society by cohesion. It is normal for children to be in contact with each other. It is almost a fundamental fact. People who have seen this phenomenon say it's like a society in embryo. It has many aspects: reciprocal help. The older children help the smaller ones, and the smaller ones help each other. And if you have the opportunity to read the full comment or the full essay, it's really beautiful, and it's actually quite moving to think of how our children in our environments have the privilege and the experience of living in this micro community and getting to gradually increase their skills and their ability towards becoming full citizens. I'm going to share a little story with you. So I was thinking about the idea of moving beyond social cohesion. And I wanted to share with you that when I was younger, I didn't really like roses. I kind of thought they were passé and just this thing that we're expected to give to one another. And I just had an aversion to them. But for many weeks and months, when I was running through this beautiful rose garden not far from my house. And as I watched the seasons change, and as I had the opportunity to observe the cycle of the rose plant, I had the opportunity to fall in love with roses. And the reason I mentioned this here, of all places, is that I changed my mind and I learned some lessons about not being so sure about what I like and dislike. And I think that that's also one of the things that we can offer in the Children's House are just simple stories like this to share an experience that we've had where somehow we've changed. And we can ask the children some simple questions. Is there anything that you like now that you didn't used to like? Like maybe you like spaghetti now, but you didn't like spaghetti before. Or you thought you knew how something would be, and then you were surprised. Can you think of other situations when you had an idea and then changed your mind? So maybe you thought it wasn't going to be very fun to go to your auntie's house, but then you had a really good time with your cousins. The idea of being open to changing your mind or being open to new ideas is fundamental also to the attitudes that were outlined before about citizenship. So moving along, one of the other skills, or a set of skills rather, involves critical thinking and integrating problem-solving skills. So we're going to move on to the elementary learner. So here's that very, very curious brain. The reasoning mind of the elementary age child wants to understand how things work, why they function the way they do, and they're not so just satisfied with facts alone. They're looking for a rationale, for things to make sense. They're ready to move on from concrete concepts and are ready to embrace or to experience abstract ideas. They engage with hypotheticals and with using their imagination in a much different way than they did in the Children's House. This is not limited to the physical world. We're looking for answers that relate to their social and intellectual lives. So we all know that the elementary child is a very social being, and that they now start to turn towards their peers in a way that they haven't before. So this is a big change. They have a powerful need for rationale and reasonable answers. And this sometimes, I think, leads them to struggle, in particular with the ideas of justice and fairness. And the child is increasingly interested in what their peers think and less so the adults around them. They want to belong to the group and are trying to find their place amongst others and amongst peers. These characteristics make this an ideal time for introducing history and social studies, as the children are interested in how society works and want to understand their place within their own community. So Montessori says, however, before embarking on a study of a method of education or cultivation, we must concern ourselves with the study of man, not only as an individual, but also as a member of the community, within the context of his relationships and his social function. So we know that they're very social. We know that they enjoy working in groups. And although their peers have become more centered in their lives, they still need and benefit from the presence of strong role models, both in the classroom and in other parts of their lives. Teachers, guide the community by creating social structures or standards rather that support learning, and kind of setting the tone for what is going to happen in these small groups. It's important that adults support learning, belonging, cooperation, and responsible decision-making. Community meetings and one-on-one conferences offer the opportunity to address concerns and also to guide outcomes. Teachers really rely on their training and observation to develop a functioning society which supports character development and membership in the community. And here the adult is a facilitator, not a leader, to be followed. At the same time, the adult does have to reinforce boundaries. In problem solving, the adult offers support and builds skills without directly solving the issue at hand, asking questions and offering guidance that develops the children's critical thinking skills. And all of this can be used in the real world. So another aspect of elementary education that scaffolds the children's experiences of becoming full citizens is going out. So going out offers children the opportunity to use their knowledge to plan and execute an outing with the safety of a chaperone or an adult with them. The children have the opportunity to interact with members of society and communities outside of their own, and maybe even outside of their own bubble, to take responsible for their actions and not just their individual actions, but also their responsibilities towards the group. So if they have to buy tickets in advance, or they have to plan the route, or make sure they know when the bus is coming, all of these things, it's not just independence for one's sake, but it's independence and responsibility towards the group. So we also have the interconnected or cosmic curriculum. And Montessori says all factors of culture may be introduced to the 6-year-old, not in a syllabus or with exactitude of detail, but in the broadcasting of the maximum number of interest. I think I must have mistyped that quote. I apologize. These will be lightly held in the mind, seeds of interest, that's what it should say. These will be lightly held in the mind, but will be capable of later germination as the will becomes more directive, and thus he may become an individual suited to these expansive times. So just in the same way that in the first subplane, we're planting certain seeds that will germinate and grow and prosper at later stages of life, we continue to do that throughout the child's education. We know that they're hungry for information, so we're giving them a picture of the whole. So the physical environment is very different than the children's house. The environment exists in places beyond the school and includes the wider community. As much as possible, the children benefit from seeing how institutions work, taking tours of public buildings, and learning how to navigate their city through planning going out activities. There are materials and books in the environment that facilitate research, and sometimes there are tablets or notebooks, depending on your school's policy. Choice and self-direction are tools of independence. And here again, we see that interconnection between the incremental approach to independence and to choice, and learning your own boundaries and being able to make good choices, and the consequences of maybe not making such good choices. They're all continuously being expanded upon or being made more complex. So the learner is welcome to pursue their interest and even share what they have learned with others. The great lessons, an overview or giving the whole of the universe, their keys to the universe, or understanding and provide a rational explanation rather for many of the really magical aspects of life. And I think that one of my favorite things to do is pop in and see great lessons being given, and to look at the children's faces and to see their joy and excitement in experiencing some of the great lessons. And we trust that by giving these lessons that the children will be inspired by seeing how everything fits together. The great lessons foster a sense of connection and responsibility in the children. And here is a really direct line to citizenship. It places the child within or on a continuum of humanity. So it reinforces this message that you belong to humanity. This is what your ancestors did. This is what you are capable of. They can see we belong to a long line of culture and progress that has produced some pretty amazing innovations. And that all of that work was produced through cooperation and hard work. We also know that the elementary child has a propensity for hero worship. So they're looking outside of their family unit, and they're looking towards sometimes people still within their social circle, but also to public figures for inspiration. And so it's important that we offer them positive examples to look up to. And I absolutely love this quote from the San Remo lectures. Montessori says, children should be made to realize that all great achievements in culture and in the arts, all sciences and industries that have brought benefit to humanity are due to the work of men who often struggled in obscurity and under conditions of great hardship. Men driven by a profound passion to create new benefits, not only for the people who lived in their times, but also for those of the future. We must convey to the children the nobility of this altruism. So it's important that we communicate what this person did for society, maybe how we still benefit. We can ask the children to consider whether or not they're still benefiting from innovation or a new idea that was created in the past. And we can put in perspective for the children what didn't exist before that individual or group of people made a particular advance. So we can underscore the idea that one person was able to do so much. And we can also invite discussion around, do we really think it was just one person? Do we really think that one person alone was able to do all of this? Did they have any help? Did they ask for help? Do you ask for help sometimes? These are all questions and discussions that contribute to community building and help to, I think, provoke some deeper connections and thoughts about these individuals, rather than just teaching the flat stories of innovation that this person did this and that person did that, but maybe perhaps giving them the perspective on the value that this individual has shared with us. So many classrooms also invite adults from a range of professions. This can be parents, family, friends, or someone from a public outreach program. And then the children can be introduced to a range of professions and to also get a little bit more understanding about what people in their community do. Here we've got one of the attitudes, which was respect for human rights as a basis of democracy. Willingness to participate in democratic decision-making at all levels and civic activities, support for social and cultural diversity, we read through some of these before, and an interest in political and socioeconomic developments. So I think that when I first went to the very first was Lead Montessori, and I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2018 or 2019. I was so taken with this idea of an invisible prepared environment. Somehow in my training, I hadn't heard it quite be described that way. And I remember that discussion so vividly. I think if we look back at the attitudes that I just shared with you from the competence, what we have in the invisible or intangible environment are some of these attitudes? So the atmosphere of the elementary is a lively place. It's full of discussion and cooperation alongside quiet study. The children are working on developing respect for those invisible boundaries, and they also work on a respect for the specific needs of individual classmates who might have diverse needs, or also, if they are the classmate with the diverse needs, communicating their needs and their boundaries and their limitations. They're also learning to be responsible and to manage their time and the outcomes, their work itself. The teacher is modeling appropriate language and manners of speaking and works with the intention to build the independence of the children, their confidence, and a sense of belonging in the environment. So that's what I mean by this invisible or intangible environment. We can't see belonging necessarily, but we know that as adults, that's part of our responsibility, and as well as setting expectations for self-discipline and responsibility. Some of the activities, events, and projects that we can that reinforce some of the things I've spoken about are things like mock elections. So here in Czech Republic, we'll be having elections later this year. We might not want to discuss the particulars of a party's platform, depending on the age range of the children we're working with, but we can talk about how voting works. We can talk about who can vote. For example, I'm a permanent resident in the Czech Republic, but I can't vote here despite living here for 22 years. Where does voting happen? Do children know that voting happens in their schools? The whole process, I think, can be really interesting and can be potential for a big work or a smaller research project. And I think from a mathematics perspective, the tallying and calculating of results, depending on your country, might lead to more confusion than not. So student parliament is another example of living some of the qualities or the components that we've talked about in citizenship. When I worked at Andílek, it was great to see that the children in the adolescence program cooperated or worked with the students in the elementary, and they were able to see what the adolescent children were going to be doing in terms of student parliament. And it was a really lovely coming together. And again, you know, the mixed age group, it offers so many benefits, and this was one of them, that they could definitely idolize the adolescent students and what they were doing in terms of student parliament and look up to them and be fascinated by what was coming in their futures. So understanding the voting process and discussing the responsibility of voting for an effective candidate, maybe not just your friend, but an effective candidate. At the school where I work now, in the upper elementary, there's a lovely virtues project where they're focusing on they've agreed upon some virtues or values, and they're focusing on one virtue at a time. And this image here that you see is a poster that the children made. And so what they're doing is they are trying to track how often they're noticing tolerance. And so they're going to be working on this project over a period of time where they're noticing tolerance. Is it in themselves? Is it other people towards them? Is it out in the wider environment? So just raising their awareness of virtues and values in their environment. And then there are also things like environmental action projects such as Roots and Shoots, which is a Jane Goodall project and has branches all over the world, including at the school where I'm working now. There are also social and emotional outcomes of working with children in this way that contribute to attitudes that the competences have outlined foster citizenship. So when children in our environments are constantly working on making appropriate choices, thinking about what you need, considering your options, considering the consequences before taking action, they know how to make choices that feel good and help. They can make choices that do not harm themselves, anyone, or anything. They can observe the consequences of their behavior and begin to learn from those consequences. They can participate or have agency within their community and within larger society, like we mentioned, the going out. And they know how to work with others to accomplish tasks, produce work, and reflect on their efforts and their input, especially in a big work or a group project. And I think an important aspect too is recognizing when they need downtime or space from others or to take care of their basic needs. So in a classroom situation where children are required to sit in one seat and do everything in at the same time as the rest of the group, I think one of the unintended consequences of that is children being separated from being able to recognize their own needs, like when they need downtime or when they're thirsty, for example. Other outcome areas are things like self-regulation, identifying and working with our emotions. And that, again, starts from the very early days of being part of a toddler community. Problem solving and conflict resolution. That, again, starts from the toddler community and continues on through the children's house and definitely in the elementary. Taking care of yourself, your ability to be responsible for yourself is an aspect of independence, and taking care of your environment is the first step towards stewardship. I often think that when we see children watering a plant or taking care of a plant in the toddler environment, that it's potentially a first step towards a relationship with nature that is so important. Many years ago at a Montessori Europe workshop, I went to a sustainability workshop, a Montessori Europe Congress. I went to a sustainability workshop. And one of the speakers there said something that I will never forget. He said, it's so important for us to not show any kind of reluctance or disgust or scorn for insects or other aspects of nature, even mud, for example, to create any kind of artificial barrier between the children and the outdoors. And he reminded us all that when you love something, when you learn how to take care of it, then you will always want to take care of it and you will treasure it. So it starts very young in our classrooms. Working with and being with each other in harmony and aware and considerate of our own needs and the needs of others, coordinated and skilled movement, being proficient in knowing how to do things, being able to take care of yourself. Again, that's a huge part of independence, and learning how to manage social problem solving with independence. So we can think of the child in the second subplane between 3 to 6 years old as, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. I'll read you this quote from the San Remo lectures. This is the great task of education, to make the child conscious of the reality and depth of human unity. Above all, we must make the children understand how extraordinarily moving it is that men are not united by their interests alone, but that deeper bonds exist at the very root of their brotherhood. This is the aspect from which we should consider human relationships if we are to create a better humanity. I really encourage you, as I've said already, this is lecture number 2 from the San Remo lectures. It's beautiful, and it's really reinforces the connections, deep connections between Montessori pedagogy and citizenship. So, in all the things that I've very quickly shared with you and gone over on a very, I think, somewhat surface level, please remember that development takes time, that some of the things that I've shared with you might not be necessarily what you're seeing at the moment in your classroom, or you might not be sure how to incorporate some of those tools or some of those ways of being, some of those dispositions. But I think it's through coming together for discussions like this, and I know we will turn things over to questions shortly, that we also grow and develop together. So thank you for sharing your time and hopefully your voice with me. Please be brave and ask questions so that we can further our discussion. Thank you.